Monsanto has clearly come to dominate the American food chain with its genetically modified seeds. It's a master at enforcing its 674 biotechnology patents, using tyrannical and ruthless tactics against small farmers. They have also moved into the production of milk with its artificial growth hormones, seeking to dominate the dairy industry as effectively as it has the seed business. Has this new corporate image made us forget about the old Monsanto's decades-long history of scorched earth and toxic contamination? Monsanto was born on November 29, 1901. In 1902, Monsanto's first product was none other than saccharin. Between the years of 1903 and 1905, their entire saccharin production was shipped to a growing soft drink company based in Georgia called Coca-Cola. By 1915, Monsanto sales hit the 1 million mark. Approximately 2 years later, Monsanto began producing aspirin. Monsanto was the top aspirin producer in the U.S. until the 1980s. In 1985, G.D. Zerland Company bought Monsanto. At this point, Monsanto became even more involved in pharmaceuticals and the sweetener industry. In addition, NutraSweet was acquired by Monsanto. World War II was the catalyst to a new partnership between Monsanto and the U.S. government. Monsanto became involved in research for the Manhattan Project, which led to the world's first nuclear bombs. Until the late 1980s, Monsanto also operated a Mound Laboratory, a nuclear facility, on behalf of the federal government. By 1955, Monsanto had branched out in the petroleum business. They acquired light oil essentially to provide themselves with petrochemical materials. With the acquisition of light oil, Monsanto was also introduced into the fertilizer business. In the 1960s and 1970s, Monsanto was the leading producer of Agent Orange for the U.S. military in Vietnam. Between the years of 1962 and 1970, the U.S. military sprayed 72 million liters of Agent Orange on over 1 million Vietnam civilians and over 100,000 U.S. troops. Within 10 years of the end of the war, 9,170 veterans had filed claims for disabilities believed to be caused by Agent Orange. In 1977, Monsanto entered a joint petrochemical venture with Conoco Oil Company. They were bought out at a later time and they utilized the profit to acquire a pharmaceutical company. By this time, G.D. Zerland was successful in getting the U.S. FDA to approve aspartame for a second time. By the late 1990s, Monsanto turned its focus to agriculture and started buying seed companies and genetic laboratories. In December 1999, Monsanto and Pharmacia announced an impending merger. Upon the completed merger in March 2000, the new company Pharmacia Corporation was created. The agricultural portion of the corporation has retained the Monsanto name. Monsanto's genetic modification program has reached 95% of domestic soybean crops and 80% of domestic corn crops. Many seed growers and crop farmers feel cornered by Monsanto as it solidifies its control over the entire seed and crop industry. Most have no other option but to continue using their products or else face ruin. In the town of Nitro, West Virginia, Monsanto operated a chemical plant from 1929 to 1995, making an herbicide that had dioxin as a byproduct. The name dioxin refers to a group of highly toxic chemicals that have been linked to heart and liver disease, human reproductive disorders, and developmental problems. The chemical builds up in tissue over time, meaning that even small exposures can accumulate to dangerous levels. In 2001, the U.S. government listed dioxin as a known human carcinogen. In 1949, at the Nitro plant, a pressure valve blew on a container of this herbicide, producing a plume of vapor and white smoke that drifted out over the town. Residue coated the interior of buildings and those inside them with a fine black powder. Many felt their skin prickle and were told to scrub down. Within days, workers experienced skin eruptions, and many were diagnosed with acne, a long-lasting and disfiguring condition. The medical report said the explosion caused a systemic intoxication in the workers involving most major organ systems. Doctors detected a strong odor coming from the patients they described as men excreting a foreign chemical through their skins. Workers also suffered aches, pain, fatigue, nervousness, loss of libido, irritability, active skin lesions, and definite patterns of psychological disorders. 226 workers became ill. Dioxin waste went into landfills, storm drains, streams, sewers, into bags with the herbicide, and then the waste was burned out into the air. Dioxin from the plant can still be found in nearby streams, rivers, and fish. Tests also show that some long-time residents have measurable amounts of dioxin in their blood. Monsanto downplayed the incident, saying that the contaminant was fairly slow-acting, and only an irritant to the skin. The nitro plant continued to produce herbicides. In the 1960s it manufactured Agent Orange, the powerful herbicide used by the U.S. military to defoliate jungles during the Vietnam War, exposing 4.8 million Vietnamese people to dioxin, resulting in 400,000 deaths and disabilities, and 500,000 children born with birth defects. 30 years after the nitro plant incident, Monsanto scientists compare death rates among exposed workers to those of non-exposed workers. When no differences between the two groups were found, Monsanto claimed that dioxin did not cause cancer and that there were no long-term effects from dioxin exposure. But when the study was re-examined, it was found to be riddled with falsified facts, misrepresentations and cover-ups which served to negate any conclusions of adverse health effects from dioxins. Several hundred former employees were too ill to travel to participate in the study. Monsanto refused to use the attending physician's reports of the illness as part of their study, saying that it would introduce inconsistencies. Thus, any critically ill dioxin-exposed workers with cancers such as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma were conveniently excluded from the Monsanto study. The studies in question also have been a key basis for denying compensation to Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange and their children suffering birth defects from such parental exposures. Early internal Monsanto documents reveal that samples of herbicides submitted to the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the 1970s were doctored. In other words, the submitted samples to the government for analysis had been specially prepared so that dioxin contamination did not exist. A later study by the National Institute of Occupation Safety and Health found a statistically significant increase in cancers in the Monsanto workers. In 1984, Monsanto wins a lawsuit filed by 7 nitro plant workers. The 7 men had contended that their lingering medical problems, including skin cancer, bladder cancer and a variety of nervous disorders, stemmed from exposure to dioxin and 5 other chemicals at the company's plant. But the federal jury found that the Monsanto company was not responsible for the illnesses of the retired employees.